Shalom. This week we are reading Parashat Terumah, which begins with Hashem's instructions to Moshe, to the children of Israel, to bring forth a contribution, the materials for the establishment of the tabernacle, the sanctuary. From this point on, in the Torah, everything really changes. In all of life, the life of the nation, the life of every individual, and really, as we'll see throughout Jewish history, the life of all the nations is going to be around this reality of this tabernacle, which becomes the permanent sanctuary in Jerusalem that is erected for the presence of God. So, can it be said that this is just another one of the Torah's commandments? And people say, there's a lot of commandments in the Torah, and this is just one. What's this obsession? At the Temple Institute, our life's work is the reestablishment of the Holy Temple, the preparation as best as possible in our time for the rebuilding of the Holy Temple. What is this obsession? Soon we're going to be coming to Sefer Vayikra, the book of Leviticus, the heart of the whole Torah. So really the question might be, what is this obsession that God has? And this whole complex system of life in the time of the Holy Temple and the instructions for seeing to it that the divine presence is emanating its blessing from the Holy Temple. This is like the most apologized for and maligned and misunderstood commandment in the Torah. And all throughout the year, we share many teachings about the Holy Temple, its function, its purpose. You can always log on to www.templeinstitute.org for information about the past, present, and future of the concept of the Holy Temple, the commandment to establish the Holy Temple, the Temple Mount. It's a lifetime of study. It's also a lifetime of study to understand the mindset of the Jewish people, how much has happened, what we've been through. It's a lifetime of study to understand what's going on in the world, what's missing from the world. What was God's intention with His instructions to us in this week's Parsha of establishing a place for Him in this world? And maybe what could the world have been? Because you see, as we emphasize constantly, this is not about a building. It's about if we could have the focus, the confidence, the purpose, the resolve to be completely centered on Hashem in our lives. This is what the nation of Israel is designed for. This is where we've been. This is what we are all about. And who really ever heard of such a thing in this world as a nation that goes constantly centered on the reality of God in its midst? Who ever heard of such a thing, that a nation could be united like one man, like Israel was in the time of the desert, when this commandment was first received, when we established the tabernacle, that we were just completely like one man with one heart pulsating in the center, and that's the tabernacle with the presence of God. And this is what Israel is designed for today as well, in all times. So who ever heard of such a thing? Certainly not those who daily work towards Israel's international isolation and ultimate disappearance. Or maybe they have heard of it. Maybe that's just what bothers them. But we know our sages teach us that if only the nations of the world would have understood what the Holy Temple brings to them and the balance of peace and harmony that it brings to the world, they never would have destroyed it, never would have allowed it to be destroyed. It takes but the merest perfunctory glance at the prophecies of the prophets of Israel, the prophecy of Haggai and Isaiah, for example, as to how all the nations will flock to the temple in a new revelation of understanding and unity, and this tremendous reunion of the family of man centered around the reality of Hashem's presence. That's what the future holds as far as the prophets of Israel are concerned, with the activation of the commandments that we are really reading about in this week's Torah portion. And today, the news of the world, the crises, nuclear threats, torture, wanton and wholesale exploitation, manipulation. Is this it? Is this really the remnant or the final score on God's vision for man back at the time of creation in the Garden of Eden? Is this the best that we can do? And a little bit of the title of this week's Torah portion is really the giveaway to the whole idea of what the temple is all about. Truma. Hashem says, speak to the children of Israel, v'yichuli truma, and let them take from me a portion. But this word, truma, it really means an elevation, to be raised up. And the gifts that are given are not actually given to God. They're the gifts of each individual that are being given to the community. It's not the individual, but the community together that erects the tabernacle, that erects the sanctuary, and the establishment of the sanctuary is the uplifting of the entire community and also the community of man. So we receive this commandment, which originally was manifest in the form of the traveling Mishkan, the tabernacle in the desert. Later it became the permanent Mikdash, the sanctuary in Jerusalem. And the whole concept of the building of this place is not, again, about a place, but about consecrating our lives. In the Torah, we see that we have a different conception of the possibilities for the human experience, because not everything is equal, and something can be consecrated, can be uplifted. And so too we consecrate ourselves and our efforts, our possessions, space, time. We have a way, a pattern of being able to sanctify, of being able to lift up to holiness. So the Torah tells us here, Hashem tells us in chapter 25 and verse 8, they shall make for me a sanctuary so that I will dwell among them. And if we compare this to Leviticus 26, Parashat Bechukotai, where Hashem says, in reference to the blessings, Venatati mishkani betochachem, I will place my sanctuary among you. This concept of dwelling among you, it extends so far beyond the mere concept of the presence of God in the temple, but rather it means the presence of God in our midst, in our lives, that we invite Him into this world, and every aspect of our private, national, and global lives are attached to Him. It's not like some magic, like poof, we put up this structure and God comes in, but rather this blessing of having God in our midst is achieved by dedicating our whole life to carry out the Torah. And hence the concept of the center of the tabernacle, the center of the Holy Temple, which is the Ark of the testimony. Now, all of the materials that are being described in this parsha, they become holy. But all of these materials we received from God, and then we give them back to Him, and they become doubly enhanced. It's like when Yaakov, the patriarch Jacob, laid the first foundation for the Holy Temple back in Genesis chapter 28 and verse 22. He said, whatever He gives me, I will repeatedly give Him a tenth back. Or even better, as David expressed at the time of the building of the first temple in Chronicles 24 verse 14, he said, everything comes from you, and what we give you comes from your hand. So everything that's involved in the building of the Holy Temple is an expression of our complete dependence and understanding of who we are in this world and what our relationship is and where all of our possessions come from and what we do with our possessions and what our physical essence and nature is a reflection of who we really are. And again, there's no limit to the depth of study, the concept of what all of these materials represent, and how, for example, we read in this week's Torah portion how the furnishings come first because they are the essential. The tabernacle is there for the furniture, not vice versa. So it's these inside furnishings that constitute the concept of what the Mikdash is really all about. These everyday doings of a human being, they are what form the avodah, the greatest service of God. And what we use to make something sacred, what we use to devote ourselves to God, everything can be elevated. All of our mundane affairs, all of the mundane matters are raised up to a connection to Hashem. And the building itself ultimately is the result of this type of complete focus and devotion. The fulfillment of the promise that Hashem makes us, I will dwell among you, comes about as a result of our making for Him a sanctuary in our lives. But as we read in Parashat Terumah, we see that the very first item that we are commanded to create, after we have received the general commandment, and they shall make me a sanctuary, first item that we are commanded to create is the ark. And the ark is the only aspect of all of the temple furnishings about which we are commanded in the plural. They shall make the ark, as if the whole purpose of, the whole fulfillment of, and they shall make for me a sanctuary lies concentrated in the Aron, in the ark. And everything else is an extension of the Aron. And of course, the Aron, the receptacle into which is placed the tablets of the law from Mount Sinai, this word, Aleph, Resh, Vav, Nun, it comes from the word Or. It comes from light, because the Aron contains the light of the Torah. And more than anything, the Aron represents the concept of this connection that we have with Hashem in this world. It was to the Aron that Moshe came to receive his prophecy, to communicate with the Almighty. And then later, in the time of the first temple, we are taught the most amazing tradition regarding the ark, the Aron, in the Holy of Holies. Our sages tell us that the Aron did not take up any space. There's some sort of tremendous mystery regarding the placement of the ark physically in the Holy of Holies. The expression is that the ark didn't take up any space because the exact dimensions of the Holy of Holies was the same as the ark itself. There was no way for this actual item to be placed in the room. So therefore, somehow, the ark represents a concept of something that is above the realm of ordinary space. And yet, it's something that we were commanded to create, and which we, the people of Israel, did create out of things that we brought forth. So it's whatever level it was able to achieve, and whatever it represents, it's something that was created by the efforts, plural, the collective efforts of the Jewish people. And more than anything, the ark in the center of the Holy Temple, in the Holy of Holies, represents Israel's acceptance of God's Torah. And we find a very amazing idea, which is really the antecedent to this amazing concept of how the ark in the Holy of Holies was above the ordinary realm of space. And that is actually in the book of Joshua, when the children of Israel were passing into the land of Israel. We read in chapter 4 how Joshua said to the people, "Prepare yourselves, for tomorrow Hashem will do wonders in your midst." Joshua then spoke to the Kohanim, saying, "Carry the ark of the covenant and pass before the people." So they carried the ark of the covenant and went before the people. And then we read in verse 9 of chapter 3 in the book of Joshua, Joshua said to the children of Israel, "Come here and hear the words of Hashem your God." And he said, "Through this you will know that the living God is in your midst." And regarding this, there is a very amazing tradition that Rashi tells us, that when Joshua said, "Come here and hear the words of Hashem your God, through this you will know." Through what? And Rashi tells us that when Joshua said, "Come here," he assembled the entire nation of Israel in between the two staves that protrude from the sides of the Aron. Just that the entire nation of Israel was able to stand in that space between the staves. And whatever this means, it is the precursor of the idea that was translated in the first temple as the ark dwelling within the Holy of Holies, taking up no space. It is somehow the connection between heaven and earth. And again, it's something that we were commanded to create, and which we did create. So the ark is covered with something called the kaporet, the cover. Kaporet, the root of that word, chaf, pei, resh, denotes sometimes something surrounding. It is the leader of a lion pack. It is also used for the word pitch, as we find in the Ark of Noah, where it was used to coat. It also conveys the concept of atonement. Every usage of this word, on the deepest level, conveys an idea, a basic idea of some sort of covering, protecting, and guarding. And so the kaporet of the Ark of the Covenant is a cover for protection. But out of this very cover, the two angels, the two kruvim, the cherubim, arise out of one piece. Later, throughout the prophets and the writings, the cherubim are always watchers and protectors. But these two kruvim that sit upon the Ark of the Covenant, where have we seen them before? This is actually the second time in the Torah that the kruvim appear. The first time was earlier in the book of Genesis, when they were also appointed as protectors and watchers of the way to the tree of life. We read in Genesis 3, "So Hashem banished him from the Garden of Eden to work the soil from which he was taken, and having driven out the man, he caused to dwell at the east of the Garden of Eden the cherubim and the flame of the ever-turning sword to guard the way of the tree of life." And back then in Breshit, when we're learning about these two kruvim that guard the way to the tree of life, did we ever wonder, what is that flaming, ever-turning sword? It's described in the book of Breshit. It's called, in Hebrew, the lahat hacherev hamitapechet. It's the flame of the sword that's constantly turning. And that word actually, lahat, literally means to be heated up, excited, distracted towards one direction over something else, something new. And it's really a description of human nature. It's always turning and changing and getting distracted, always looking in a different direction. And that's what keeps us away from the tree of life, that flaming sword that's constantly turning. You see, here the kruvim are again. First thing Hashem tells us in this parsha, first thing that we have to construct, around which we are to construct the tabernacle and later the sanctuary. The ark is the repository in the temple of the secret of the tree of life, the Torah itself, the tablets of the law. And this commandment and this way of life and this revelation that the Torah is giving us, the establishment of the tabernacle, the establishment of the sanctuary, the perpetual commandment of bringing Hashem into this world and focusing on that reality and uplifting every aspect of our lives, this is the secret of the tree of life. And this is Hashem's greatest gift to us, the ability for us to live our lives with a presence of godliness, uplifting every aspect of our endeavors and constantly being focused on the rectification of man in the Garden of Eden and the uplifting and the ennoblement of the human spirit by literally living in this world with God. And that is really the secret of the concept of the Holy Temple.